Good morning, everyone. Such a joy to be able to share the Word of God with you on this fine day. I hope that you're all well. We've embarked on this amazing journey through the book of Judges, and we've met these great characters that carried so much of purpose and so much of potential, and they overcame immense crises and managed to bring their lands into rest by simply being a good example. We've studied the life of Othniel, we've studied the life of Ehud, we looked at Shamgar, and there were so many incredible truths that we were able to pull out of these men's journeys with the Lord in bringing their land into rest. We saw that Othniel was this amazing man that is a picture of Christ that came up against huge adversities. He came up against this system called double wickedness. And he could only do that by roaring like the Lion of Judah. And then you see that Israel once again falls into this depravity once again. And then the Lord raises up Ehud, who could overcome this fivefold enemy and bring the land into rest. And in the lifetime of Ehud lived a man named Shamgar, also a man with immense potential. This man was able to take a simple ox goad, the simple thing in his hand, and upgrade it into a battle axe and deal with these ideologies of the world. But sadly, his story was not a good one. His legacy was not a good one. Unlike Othniel and Ehud from before, where they brought the land into rest for 40 years and then 80 years, Shamgar contributed to a rest, but he couldn't actually bring the land into rest. So something fell short along the way. This man carried so much of potential. This man was activated under such powerful grace, but he failed in the most important aspect, and that is he couldn't bring people together. Othniel got the people together and he got the temple going again. Ehud got the people together. He blew that trumpet, and all the sons from Ephraim, and including Shamgar, were activated. He brought the people together. But Shamgar, could not bring the people together. So therefore, he ends up being this tragic character in the Bible, because he built an independent ministry. He built the celebrity ministry. He had the right tools, he had the right grace, he had the right message, but he didn't multiply himself in a son. So he was activated under this grace. He cleaved to the grace of the Father that was in the nation, but he himself didn't father other sons. In fact, what we see is a ministry that started out accurately, but it ended up in desolation. And we know this when we look at Deborah's song, Deborah the prophetess. And she says that as in the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, and Jael, it says that the village life ceased and people didn't walk on the highways, they walked in the byways. People were locked in their houses. It was almost like quarantine. It was like desolation until Deborah rose up. So we see that even though Ehud was bringing grace for 80 years and he was bringing rest for those 80 years, they were safe from wars. But Shamgar, under his grace, yes, he killed 600 Philistines, but he couldn't transition everybody out of that place. They remained in this place of desolation. So this is the background on which our character today rises up. And this is an amazing woman named Deborah. And we are going to study her, and we're going to look at how God really used her. So I'm going to start off by doing a little narrative of the scriptures. You need to go and study the book of Judges, chapter 4 and chapter 5. Judges chapter 4 tells you about her whole story and what happened. And Judges chapter 5 is the Song of Deborah, which is a prophetic song. And this song gives us more clues as to what happened in the life of Deborah. So in summary, she's the fourth judge to rule over the people. And she's one of the most famous women. And she's named Prophetess Deborah. And once again, the people have entered into the cycle of idolatry. And as a consequence, God sells them to the king of Canaan, Jabin. So Jabin is not his name, but Jabin points to a dynasty, like Pharaoh. So Jabin's royal residence was in the city of Hazor. And he had this cruel general named Sisera, who oppressed Israel for 20 years. Sisera possessed a well-trained army of cavalry. He also had 900 iron chariots, and these were considered the iron tanks of the day. And the people suffered terribly under this cruel rule of Sisera. And in great despair, they cry out to God. Now, Barak was the strongest and noblest of men in those days. And he had given up all hope of ever conquering the Canaanites. And then it was then that God sent them Deborah the prophetess. And she is one of the 7 women prophetesses whose prophecies are recorded in the Bible. Deborah was the wife, we think, of a man named Lapidoth, which means torches. And she lived in the mountains of Ephraim. And between the place of Ramah and Bethel is where she judged man of their sin and their idolatry. But she remained true to God. She was wise, she was God-fearing, and people would flock to her for advice. And she would be ministering to them and, urging them to leave their evil and wicked ways and turn back to God. And then when she had felt that she had helped the people enough, that's when she sends for Barak. And she reminds Barak of what the Lord had already said, that now is the time for you to rise up against this enemy. And then she commands him and she commissions him to go and get the other tribes together, and Naphtali and Zebulun join with him, and that they needed to go to the foothills of this place called Tabor, the mountain of Tabor, and that's when they were going to attack the Canaanites. But then Barak, of course, refused to go. He said, I will not go unless you, Deborah, come with me. And she says, sure, fair enough, I will come with you. But just know that this war, the glory is not going to be yours. It belongs to another. It belongs to a woman. So then they go and they start this attack. It looked, when you looked at this, 10,000 people that had come against this 100,000 that had come against this million, it looked so small, it looked so ridiculous that they would go to war. But then God does something amazing. He does something miraculous. He caused these rains, he caused the storm to come, and he opened up the floodgates, and all of these iron chariots got stuck in the mud. And the people got so confused, and it was in that day, amongst this confusion, that Israel attacked the Canaanites and destroyed every one of them except one man named Sisera. He was the general. So he runs when he realizes that they're losing the war. He leaves and he runs on foot, and he comes to the tent of a man that he had peace with. So Heber was a Kenite, and he was a descendant of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. And he had made peace with Jabin. So he thought that this was a safe place to come. So he comes into this tent, and he's invited into the tent by Jael, the wife of Heber. And when he was asleep, she takes a hammer and a peg. The peg is a tent peg that holds the tents together. And she drives it into his temple, and she kills him. And then when Barak comes in pursuit, she opens the tent and says, "Here is the man." Her exact words was, "Come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest." And she led Barak into the tent, and there lay this cruel leader, dead. And as Deborah had predicted, the glory belonged to a woman, not Deborah. And then she writes this immortal song known as the Song of Deborah. Now that's an epic tale. That's an amazing tale. In fact, they should make a movie about this. How beautiful is this story? But this book is so loaded with imagery. It's so loaded with secrets from God. Secrets on how we can overcome. When we studied Shamgar, we were introduced to the different ideologies of the world. So starting with Othniel, we saw that this double wickedness is talking about the false dimension, it's talking about the false church, it's talking about the false bride, it's talking about the harlot. We saw how he positioned himself against that enemy, roaring like the Lion of Judah. Then we went into Ehud and we saw that the Moabite is a picture of independence, of not wanting a father. You lose your protection if you are not in a father-son covering. And when that happens, you get these other enemies. That's tribal division. All of the things that separate us, men and women, from the things of God, from racism to, to all of the isms. All the things that separate us, all the tribal divisions, all the things, you're black, you're white, you're Chinese, you're yellow, you're of a different ethnicity, you're of a different culture, you're of a different gender. All of those things that separate us, comes in, it brings division and destroys. And then we also see depression, this mindset that weighs us down, that prevents us from overcoming in the midst of our crises. This is what happens when we lack the protection of God. We also saw the Philistine, which is a picture of the flesh. And when Shamgar used that simple ox goad and he upgraded it into a battle axe, the point of the battle axe is to destroy ideologies. And we went through quite a few of them in Shamgar in that series, and you can go ahead and you can listen to those again. But the key thing to note is that every one of us has been contaminated by an ideology of this world. From the very first time you start reading, from the time you go to school, by the time you're 5 years old, you have been contaminated with an ideology. It's inevitable. The idea is for us to be able to identify these ideologies, identify where our thoughts and our lifestyle is not aligned with God, and then put aside those thoughts, put aside those mindsets, and start doing things the way the Lord wants us to do things. Follow things according to kingdom principles. And then when we start manifesting that in our life, when people now come and read our life stories, when they look at us as case studies, and when they study us, they start to see the scriptures manifest. So if people ask you, why are you successful? I am successful because I do not do the things the way the world does it. I have reformed from this mentality. I have put aside humanism. I have put aside secularism. I have put aside capitalism. I have put aside fascism. I have put aside postmodernism. I've put aside modernism. I've put aside feminism. I've put aside all those things. I've put aside racism. I've put aside terrorism. And now I follow one way, and that is Christ. And so that's what we have come to. We have to identify the ideology. Now, when you look at Deborah, there is one dominant ideology in this book. Reading from Judges chapter 4, we're just going to do an exegesis of these scriptures now. And we see, what did the people do? The people, Ehud's dead, and Israel now does evil in the sight of the Lord. So we see that man in himself, man and woman, is incapable of self-maintaining a life of righteousness. So we can only remain righteous with the Holy Spirit who convicts us of all truth. And it is for this reason God has raised up fathers that can mentor our souls and keep us out of sin, that can be a witness to our lives. This relationship is only going to work if there is a close bond between father and son, of friendship and pursuit for the inheritance that is locked within a father. So they die, Ehud dies, and now the people are now in bondage. And God sells them. It says that the Lord sold them to the hand of Jabin, the king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Horesheth Hagoim. So Judges chapter 2 verse 14 has defined what the word sold means. So sold means that he has given up ownership. So he could not stand against their enemies. That means they can't overcome. It means that they have no dominion. It means that they have no strength. They have no might. They have no wisdom. They have no ability to fight. So by failing to stand up to the enemies, it means that they have overcome and they become cowardly and they become timid. And Jabin means, the word Jabin means intelligent. So by studying the words, the Hebrew words, the original words, it gives us the meaning of the words, and it also enlightens us to the spirit of the person, to the purpose of the person, to the potential of the person, and we extract great truths from this. So Jabin means intelligent, and he was the ruler of Canaan. The word Canaan means trafficker or merchant. So you see, God has now handed them over to an intelligent merchant trafficker. So merchant has to do with business. Trafficker has to do with slavery. It's about trafficking people, bringing people into a bondage. So God raised up this enemy, and this enemy is Jabin, the king of Canaan. This is an intelligent demonic principality that traffics people into financial bondage. Merchandising has got to do with our finance. It has to do with our business. So this is an intelligent enemy that brings us into a system of financial bondage through merchandising. So the people have been trafficked into a system of merchandising, which brings them into financial bondage. So what is that? By now you should know. I've already given you clues. This is a system of capitalism. This is a bondage system of capitalism. So I'm going to stop there. And I urge you to go and do a little bit of research. Go and do a Google search. What are the 10 tenets of capitalism? Because I assure you that there are many God-fearing men and women out there that love the Lord, but they have the ideology of capitalism has also captured their mind. The failed system of the charismatic, the failed season of the charismatic is because of capitalism. It's this demon, think of it, think of Sisera with the 900 chariots, is very big. This is an intelligent system. This system is much smarter than we know. So go and do a little bit of research on this, and we'll be back and we're going to talk more about capitalism. God bless you.